Good evening and welcome to the Greenfield Public Schools Special School Committee meeting for Monday, July 12, 2021. It is 6 p.m. I don't get to read my fun little thing about a remote meeting, which always disappoints me, so we'll just have to settle for the fact that we're at the Greenfield High School cafeteria, 21 Bar Avenue. The agenda for this evening is very simple. We're going to do a roll call, and then we're going to ask some questions of our candidate finalist for superintendent, Dr. Bernard Audet. Sorry, I'll do better with that next time. And the first item, we'll go ahead and do a roll call, please. Secretary Johnson-Musad.
Member Karen?
Here.
Vice Chair Ekstrom?
Here.
Member Hollins?
Here.
Secretary Johnson-Musad, I am here. Chair Prayati?
Here.
Member Wall? Mayor Wiedegardner. We have a quorum.
Thank you. So we're called to order at 6:01 p.m. Just a couple of programming notes. I want to acknowledge that Mayor Wiedegardner, who is a voting member of the school committee, is on vacation. I understand that you had an opportunity to talk with her last week. Is that correct? Okay. And unfortunately, Member Wall, Jean Wall, our chair of the search committee, who I know you've met with before, is not able to be here tonight. It is unexpected. So I want to acknowledge the work that she did along with the search committee to get us to this point. And I know that if she could be here, she very much would want to be, to see you again and participate in the final pieces of our search here. So thank you for being here, and I would like to first give you a chance to do some opening remarks. Our format will have 3 parts. You can make an opening statement if you wish, and after that, we'll have 10 questions, and we'll close by first giving our school committee members an opportunity to ask any follow-up of the questions they asked during the standard question period. And then we'll ask for you to ask any questions of us at that time. And why don't we quickly have each of the school committee members introduce themselves? Glenn, can we start with you and go this way?
Glenn Johnson-Musad.
Hi, Katie Karen. Nice to meet you.
Susan Ekstrom. I'm the vice chair of the school committee.
And Glenn neglected to mention he's the secretary of the school committee. And I'm Amy Prayati. I'm also the chair.
Susan Hollins, how are you? Nice to see you.
Why don't you go ahead with your opening statement, please?
Okay. Well, again, thank you for having me here tonight. I'm honored to be part of this process. And I do want to thank you all so much for the work that you have put in to select your next superintendent. I know how hard it is. I know how arduous that process has been. I have served on that process from a district side before. And thank you all for your service on behalf of the students of Greenfield, because it's people like you that give of their time and effort that make schools as excellent as they are. And again, I just thank you for that. When I first went through the what our next superintendent will be, I was very excited because I felt like I met all of the criteria that you laid out. And I just want to highlight a few before we begin. I have a strong background in curriculum development and pedagogy. I have worked at all levels, providing professional development, mentorship, and a collegiate experience for teachers. I have taught in all levels from elementary, middle, and high school, and I have spent my career developing collaborative teams. Collaboration is the only way I know to work. I believe in the concept of a team, and I know we're as strong as each of our parts, and it's our job to work with our teammates to create the strongest and most effective program that we can. And that's something that has served me well in all of the different schools that I've worked with. I also believe it's really strong for us to build a partnership between the city and the school department. There has to be trust. as I talked with the mayor about. There has to be transparency. We all have to be moving in the same direction for the same agenda. If we're not, then we're pulling in opposite directions, and that's going to impact the ability to offer quality programs at each junction. I will be, and I am, a passionate champion for education. Should I be the one selected as your next superintendent, I will be a solid and ardent voice out in the community for schools, championing all of the wonderful things that are happening in the schools. I am not a believer in a superintendent that just is in his or her office. For me, that's not the job. A significant part of that job is to understand firsthand what happens in the schools, and then to be able to use that to show others the great things that are happening. And when you do that, you get additional support from the community because they actually understand what's happening. Communication is essential. I believe that listening is essential, especially as a new person coming on board. You need to understand where the district is, what people's perspectives are, and use that to form a collaborative discussion going forward into the areas that we would like to see grown and developed. As far as a superintendent working with the school committee, I feel it's essential that I keep you updated and that you keep me updated, and that never should either one of us feel that we're in a position of being surprised. We work best when we are, again, informing each other and on the same page. I think it's essential to be visible in all of the schools. I talked about the community, but I have to be visible in all of the schools regularly. It should not be a surprise that I show up to walk through classes and see what our students are doing. For me, having credibility is essential. That is a foundational part of the work I have always done. I will always be honest, I will always tell the truth, and I will take responsibility for what our organization does, even if it's not the optimal result. What I think is important, too, is that we learn from things that aren't optimal or don't work well. And it's essential that we model that for our students, because students have to understand the power of a mistake and understand how that helps them turn something into something very positive. I would not arrive at your school district or any school district with my own agenda. Rather, it's the agenda that we set as a community of school leaders and stakeholders out in the greater community. Transparency, as I mentioned, is essential, and I would make sure that I was transparent to you, parents, community stakeholders, our teachers, etc. And then finally, I have a solid background in school and corporate finance, which I feel probably makes me a bit unique. I have an MBA. I have done the job of assistant superintendent, school business manager. I understand school finance. I understand how to advocate at the state level for school finance, and I understand how to work with a municipality, or in the case of when I was at Quabbin, 5 different towns. And I feel that that, as well as my unique background with renewable energy, which I was thrilled to see on your what our next superintendent will be, I have a very unique background with wind turbine as well as renewable energy storage, and incorporating not only the fact of having it, but incorporating it into our academic program for our kids. And then I would just, again, thank you for having me, and I am very much looking forward to our discussion tonight.
Thank you so much. Appreciate getting that perspective. And we'll go right into the questions here. And I have the first one. You'll notice we're going to jump around from member to member tonight. Hopefully that won't throw you off too much. The first question, curious if you knew anything about Greenfield or Franklin County before applying for this job. And if yes, what was it?
As I said before, I came from the town of Hardwick, which is the last town in Worcester County. When I was, when my parents, when we moved there were more cows than people. And so I got involved in agriculture, and I showed dairy cattle. So I showed at Franklin County. I was out here for State Dairy Expo, Big E, and you name it. Well, my children picked that up. as when they were young, and so we continued that tradition. Hardwick and the towns in the Quabbin Regional District are very similar to Greenfield. You're larger. You have a bit, obviously you're a city, so you have a bit more of a commercial and industrial sort of aspect than we did. But us in Western Mass, us west of 495, continue to fight the fight of not being funded equitably. And so that's a passion of mine. It's been present in all of my schools. So I feel like I know the area well. I feel like it feels like home, and that's why I decided to apply.
Thank you very much.
I have the next question. There will be an election for 3 of our 7 school committee members in November. I've served on the committee for 6 years, and during that time, our responsibilities have varied greatly. What do you envision as the role of a school committee member, and why should people get involved?
Well, being a political science major and social studies teacher for a long time, community involvement is essential. It's what our country runs on. If it weren't for people like you, jobs would not get done that are essential in cities and towns all across this nation. As far as how responsibilities have changed, certainly as we've gone through varying levels of reform in our state, things have changed. My guess is that things will continue to evolve and change over time as they continue to seem to do. I've always felt that the superintendent is really responsible for the day-to-day operations of the school district. Some person at one point said, is there any decision that just has to be made by the superintendent? And I said, well, issues of safety and emergency. That, boom, you got to do it. All right, you got to take charge and you have to do it to make sure everybody's safe. Beyond that, we have the ability to collaborate, to confer, and to plan. And one of the things that I would say, as if I were chosen, is I would want to see the development of a new 5 to 7 year plan for the school district. One that obviously I would be getting your input, but I'd also be getting the input of many other stakeholder groups at the same time, ultimately with me bringing to you all sort of a working draft of where the priorities seem to have shaken out. We can't improve everything or working on everything at once. It has to be reasonable. So we have to have goals that are attainable, goals that are measurable so we know whether or not we've achieved them, and it has to have a realistic time frame so that we can measure it in the time frame that we're looking at. But so I see that happening. I also know from working with members of the school committee in the Quabbin district, people go to members of the school committee and they offer their thoughts, maybe more complaints than compliments, and you're sometimes on the first line of that. That's one of the reasons that I think you all need to be informed about what's going on. You don't want to be out in public to find out that there was a significant issue, X, Y, and Z, and if I was the superintendent and I didn't let you know that. It's our job to keep each other informed about that so that, you know, if a parent comes up or a constituent, you're able to at least say, we're addressing it, we're working through whatever issue there is, and then speak publicly about whatever we can speak publicly about. But I do feel that the superintendent needs to have the freedom to run that school or the school district on a day-to-day basis. Of course, we develop budgets and then we present them to you for your input. We make personnel decisions at the school level, but also, keep you informed of things that are going on if we have issues or concerns. But it's got to be a relationship of trust. You have to trust me, and I have to trust you. If that trust does not exist, similar to a marriage relationship, it's probably not going to work. All I can tell you is that I will always be, transparent. I think that's essential and honest in what I tell you, and that I think it's essential that we're all on the same page once we ultimately develop that plan, that's where we're all pushing towards.
Thank you. And I have the next one again. I promise it won't just go back and forth here after this. The roles and responsibilities of school committees and superintendents are sometimes clear and sometimes ambiguous. For example, budget approval versus budget implementation, or personnel policy and finance versus personnel administration, or even dealing with parents and teachers with concerns or complaints. Can you describe some situations where these roles and responsibilities have challenged you and how you would work to address them were you our superintendent?
Certainly. As I noted in my answer earlier, people will come to you with all sorts of issues and things that they want to discuss. And there are things that are, confidential in nature that we have to respect. Student record privacy laws, we have to respect personnel law, all of those things, and we have to follow a very prescribed process when we're involved in something like that. Again, I see the school committee's job as the highest viewpoint of a view of the school district. 35, 40,000 feet, you see the whole thing, you're at that top level. And so I have to, as the superintendent and principals and other administrators, have to deal with the things that are a little closer to, sort of the ground level. We have had instances in my career where parents have gone to school committee members and they have brought forth something that has crossed some of those lines. All I can say is that it's my responsibility. It was my responsibility as the member of this administrative team when I was assistant superintendent to follow all laws and policies and procedures, and remembering too that the school committee adopts all of the policies and procedures that we utilize in the school district, and those should be guiding the behavior and our actions, as well as, they shouldn't be out of sync with the law, so all of that should be moving in the same direction. But at the same time, I have to do my best to, within the confines of all policy and legal obligation, keep you abreast of things that are important that have happened, so that you have a comfort level that we have addressed things, that problems have been taken care of, and when more information can be shared, more information will be shared. But I think it's very difficult for a superintendent and school administrators to run their schools day to day if there's a lot of second guessing, if you will, from the school committee level. I understand it often comes from very good places, but it does become difficult. And that's where we all have to sort of know, okay, this is within my role, this is in my lane, and then, oh no, this is in their lane, this is at another level, and we've got to bring it up.
Thank you.
My turn. I have to turn back into me. Student achievement is at the core of the public school system. In regard to student performance, how would you use the data from our schools to prioritize the use of resources, including money, facilities, and human capital? Would this be a collaborative discussion with the school committee and the public, and if so, how?
I see this closely tied to what we were just speaking about in terms of a 5 to 7 year plan. What we would be identifying in that plan and charting a course to would probably be some of these things that you're speaking about right here. Student achievement data must be used to inform what we do. Okay, so I like to say data informed and student driven. And I say those very intently. Students' needs and what students need to experience in a classroom to be successful with the teacher should really be driving what those students are getting in order to meet the standards that we're asking them to meet. The data from the accountability system is one element of data that we use to see how we're doing. I understand the importance of the MCAS system as articulated and designed by our Board of Education. However, I also know that we're dealing with people, and people don't always improve in a fashion that might be suggested in the accountability calculations. So we never want to forget that we're dealing with human beings who have needs, who have challenges in their lives, and who have to balance all of that as they come to our schools every day. And we never want to sort of prioritize the data over the reality of what they're experiencing, which is why everyone is so intent, rightfully so, on paying attention to the social and emotional learning aspect of what we need to do in our schools. We know that if students aren't in a good place, it doesn't matter what we're going to do in the classroom. These higher issues need to be addressed, and they need help and assistance to get to a place where they can effectively learn. As far as, again, the plan, I think we need to involve, obviously, the school committee, obviously parents, obviously students, our faculty. Everybody has to be a part of that. If they're not an authentic part of that, then unfortunately we run the risk of having it seem as though it's being forced down their throat from a top-down sort of situation. And my experience has been, when those things have occurred, they are less than successful. I can tell you one point in my career, I arrived back in my ELA fifth grade classroom to find a brand new set of books, all unpacked, all in boxes, a week before school started. And so I said to my colleague who had been in the day before, I'm like, what's that? He goes, oh, that's our new reading series. I said, what new reading series? He said, exactly. So unilaterally, one person in the district made the decision that this was going to happen across the district. And I will tell you, the teachers across the district were less than excited and never bought into that program. I understand that after I moved on from that district, and I understand that those books found their way to a place where they're no longer used. And that was a lot of money that was wasted because of the way it was implemented. You got to get buy-in. It's the only way for it to work. So anything that we would be doing, I would certainly be eliciting feedback from all of those stakeholders.
Many schools have been transitioning from traditional discipline to a model of restorative justice, where students are coached to resolve problems and make amends through communication and mediation. What's your picture of the school's role in addressing student conflicts and misbehavior?
Right now, in my current role, the students that we have in class are often going through restorative justice programs simultaneously to their academic experience. At Holy Name, we did a number of things in this model. We were working on what I would call a more formal restorative justice program when things sort of fell apart, and unfortunately that wasn't seen through. However, prior to that, we did a number of things that were student-led that worked on issues of bullying, worked on issues of acceptance, where our students would be presenting frequently to other bodies of students, talking student to student about the expectation of how we treat people well and the things to look out for when other students might be experiencing things like bullying, intimidation, and things that we certainly don't want in our school. We all know that when students are worrying about those things, they are unable to achieve their best in any other situation, because it takes a lot of energy and effort to deal with that constant worry. So the school's role in making that happen was to provide facilitation of the student meetings so that the student groups that were running that were supervised. And then as a whole school, our role was to make sure that students had the opportunity to present to student groups, that students had the opportunity to leave our school and go present at other schools within our city, and to help and assist by providing supplies and other things that their mission needed. So we were really the facilitator, but it was the student's idea. It was the student's voice. And I would tell you that our experience was that it was incredibly powerful and incredibly effective. And when we sent students, as we were at a Catholic school, we sent students to many of the public schools, and I would receive calls from the principals of those schools thanking us so much for sending them and trying to book them for next year. Because there's nothing more effective than students talking to students and saying, this is what we believe and this is why. So I wish I could speak more on what our restorative justice program would have been, but like I said, unfortunately, things happened and I left the school.
Hi. The lines between being an institution for learning and being a social service agency often get blurred. How have you navigated that in your career in education, and how do you mentor and advise less seasoned professionals in managing this reality in their own careers?
Yeah, the lines are very blurred. And I think more and more responsibilities over time have been shifted to the schools for us to manage and to deal with and to provide wraparound services for our students. I think it's important, though, that as educators, we all know our effective place. I am not a trained counselor. That's not in my background. I know how to listen, I know how to be compassionate, and most importantly, I know how to refer. And what I always tell anyone that I'm working with is I want you to be that person that students will go to. I want you to be that open heart and that open ear for them. They need to get it out, and they're coming to you because they trust you. However, understand that there are a few things that we need to make sure occur. One, that a referral is made to the appropriate adjustment counselor or guidance counselor, whomever we have in the school, that are helping students navigate the troubles that might have been disclosed. And then two, we're mandated reporters. And so we need to make sure, and I would always say this to students when, if they approached me and they said, can I tell you this and can you promise not to tell anyone else? No, I can't do that. And here's why. Your safety and security comes first. And if I hear something that I feel your safety and security is in jeopardy, it is my job to report that. And that doesn't mean I don't care, and that doesn't mean that I want to put you in a difficult spot, but your safety and security has to be paramount at all times. And most of the students are generally understanding of that and will go forward. Sometimes they'll say, oh, no, I'm not ready. But now that you know that there's an issue, again, refer so that they can check in. And also you as a person they've gone to, I would say, you need to check in. How you doing? We talked the other day. Did you talk to so-and-so? What else can I hook you up with somebody else that might be able to help you? How are you feeling? And really be that ear, because we want to be present for our students. They're counting on us. And when they come to us, they're coming to us for a reason. They're looking for some help. They're looking for some assistance. They may not know exactly where to turn, but they trust the person they're speaking to, and that's important.
School districts start planning a budget 8 to 20 months ahead in the next year. How do you conceptualize a budget that far in advance? And if you find out you're a $500,000 short in the middle of a fiscal year, what do you cut or reduce?
Well, we start planning budgets so far ahead because we really have to. The state has never been consistent on its timeline. And I know in the Quabbin district, oftentimes we went to town meeting without having a final state number, which I'll tell you, some of the finance committee members just couldn't understand. And you have to explain to them, well, it's a political process, and sorry, but it's held up in the legislature. How do you build a budget? Well, first, there are a number of ways that you can do that. You zero-based budgeting. We start at the very bottom and we build up and we rationalize and validate every expenditure up each line item. That's an option. Then there are level services budgets where we just take where we were in the previous school year and create line items that provide for the same level of service, adjusting for things like contract raises, raises in utility rates, et cetera. So you know your budget in advance in the sense that you know what your strategic plan has said, and in your strategic plan, you would itemize some of the things that you hope to achieve in year 2 and year 3, some of which may be additional capital expenditures, some of which may be expenditures on new positions, et cetera. So you would build that in. If we get into a school year and we find out that we're short, well, first of all, the question would be, why are we short? And really get to the root of that. Because if we're budgeting effectively, okay, we should be reasonably close, understanding that there are things that are certainly out of our control and do change. One of the things that has been sort of a wild card for me in districts in the past has been special education out of district tuition and transportation. We don't know what our special ed needs are going to be when a year starts. I mean, we don't know who's going to move in, we don't know who's going to move out, we don't know any of those variables. So with some of that, we have to plan in our budget with a little bit of cushion. It would be sort of foolish and irresponsible not to, given that we know that that could happen. You know, when I was in the Quabbin Regional School District, we were the #1 school choice school, so we were able to have a very flush excess and deficiency account. And we were able to use that at times, not in total, but in small amounts, to level the expenditures that we realized when we were going through the year. At times, we would have to put freezes on things. So maybe we would say no more purchasing after April 1, et cetera. What we were very good at and lucky with is we never had to cut any program. So as I sit before you today, you know, and I'm putting myself out there, but I've never had to cut a program. And what I can tell you is we've always found creative ways to finance those programs. You know, now that I've said that, you know, I'm going to have trouble funding a program probably. But I mean, I guess my point is that there are other ways other than the traditional budget to get things done. And sometimes I think it's a bit more resourcefulness and ingenuity. There are people and foundations that you can go to for certain things. You know, none of us function without grants anymore, and I'm not talking just the federal entitlement grants. I'm talking about other competitive grants from the State Department of Education. We all need them in order to function, and you know, to explore new things. We often compete for those competitive grants to first scope out a program, and then if our scoping out is successful, well, then we get some money to launch the program. So we always have to be looking at those things as options. My fear in cutting a program, honestly, is that in my experience, when I've seen districts cut programs, they have a very hard time getting them back. And every program we have is valuable immensely to the students we serve. And I do, you know, stick my neck out there, you know, for the arts a bit, because I feel like they take it on the chin all the time. And there's a great body of research that you probably are all well aware of that talk about the effectiveness of arts education on the overall student achievement. So it really doesn't make a lot of sense. And we were able to be that school choice district at Quabbin because we didn't cut programs when others did. So I hope that answers your question.
And just to add, the background noise with the basketballs, and that's provided free of charge to all
Thank you.
candidates.
Okay.
The citizens in our community demand value for their tax dollars and transparency and fiscal accountability. In this light, tell us about how you have ensured that the budget you propose and the financial plan that you oversee, as approved by the school committee, is as compact and efficient as possible.
Everybody needs to be able to understand the budget. If we're going to have transparency, it can't be this behemoth of lines and numbers that no one can figure out. And I've heard that as a criticism from a number of school districts. You know, we can't figure it out. They don't even show us. Well, no. And as I looked at your budget online, it's very clear. It's easy to follow. I pretty much anybody could follow and see where that money is being spent. I think it's important to keep things as tight as possible. You, of course, all know that we need to follow the accounting structure that the state provides in terms of class and object code and all of that. So where, you know, the structure that it needs to follow accounting-wise is driven by the state. So there's not a lot we can do with that. But we need to make sure that, again, lines are tight, lines are labeled correctly, and that when we go to discuss it first with you as the school committee, and then when it gets put forth at the city level, that everybody understands what all those lines really mean, and that the questions, and they're fair questions, but that they get answered ahead of time. When we were at Quabbin and we were doing our visits with all the different selectmen and finance committees, we would have detailed budget books for each of the towns we would visit. And so if somebody said, I want to go to the elementary school's line for textbooks purchases for the year, we could be able to tell them by category what it is we were looking to purchase and why. And when we could do that, I can't remember anybody challenging that we were going to do that. I think what they wanted to see is, could you do that? Or was it just a general number that you've thrown in there? People know that costs increase, their own costs increase. The same things that's happening in the school is happening to them at home. So I think they're generally pretty understanding about that. What they need to feel comfortable with is that we are transparent with how we built that and why we've made some of those choices. Sometimes I've seen discussions get into, well, do you need this new position? Okay, well, that's incumbent upon me as the superintendent to be able to explain why that position is essential. Town may decide to disagree with me, but I need to give that honest reason as to why we need it and do my best to allow them to see the value of that and keeping it in the budget.
In this rural region, there are few school transportation businesses. With limited options, what model would you recommend? District ownership or contracting for transportation services or something else? What are the advantages and disadvantages of these options, and what can be done to address high transportation costs?
Well, as you probably know, I did almost 10 years of corporate finance before going into education. I have my MBA. So I would approach this like any other business decision, which would be, what are the investment requirements and what's the return on investment for us doing that, whether it be contracting or owning our own. What I will say is it has been my experience with some of the stuff we did at Quabbin that it was an area for us to increase our revenue. We also, because we were in a very rural and regional setting, we explored housing, and we actually did house for a while, a special education in-house program in one of our school facilities, and accepted tuition students from other districts. We did that for a couple of reasons. One, we already had the program, and the program was working very well for us. We had no desire to dismantle that program. Frankly, it would have been much too disruptive to the students who are in the program. So what we said is, we have extra capacity. If we open up spots to tuition from other school districts, we're going to, A, continue to operate this program without any additional real cost, and B, we're going to be helping out another district by providing this program, which we were very proud of. And so in that case, financially, it made a lot of sense, because it was only upside to us. There was no downside. In the area of transportation, again, we opted to own some of our own vans because it was cheaper for us, and we lived in an area that was far away from a lot of the places we were sending our students, so that it became very costly. And so we did some of that math to say, if we were to continue to contract, it would cost X. If we bought, it would cost Y. Here's the payback on that buy decision, and here's where it really starts to pay back. And so we didn't buy all of the vans, but we bought several to deal with some of our more expensive transportation routes. I think as school districts who realize that money is tight and will be tight over time, we need to look at options like that, to be a bit entrepreneurial. You're in, similarly to us, a rural area with other smaller school districts around who may not have the capital to sort of do this themselves. I understand from talking to your transportation person earlier in the day that you have already been providing transportation to some of those students. And again, I think that makes sense. What we obviously have to pay attention to, and where it becomes a little dicey, is when we say, here's our transportation our requirement for our students. Here's the students we're looking at. Can we meet our requirement in the same time as we do is take on additional students? Because we can't not fulfill the needs of our students by taking on something else. Similarly to school choice, right? School choice works when we have capacity in our classrooms. So we just have to be cognizant of that. And back to the question before about, a budget shortfall, we don't know what's going to happen in special ed in all of these other districts. So we could start out, say, transporting 3 students from Gil Montague, and all of a sudden by Thanksgiving, it's now 5. Can we handle the 5? So we have to, consider that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Currently in Greenfield, we have a school resource store available at the police station, but not housed in our school buildings. As superintendent, would you continue this practice? What role, if any, do you see for school resource officers in our schools?
I have only operated in all of my schools, I guess currently the way you are doing it here, where we've had an officer that we've been designated to reach out to should we have a need. And so I have never been in a school situation where we had a school resource officer full-time present in the school. One of the things that's important to me, and I mentioned it to some folks earlier tonight, is that the schoolhouse remains a schoolhouse. There's a certain level of comfort and vibe that comes from a school that's loving and nurturing, that does get, in my opinion, a bit altered when you introduce something like full-time police presence. Now, I'm not here to criticize anybody that chooses that direction, and I'm not saying that there couldn't be an occasion where I would think that that was a move in the right direction. But as I sit here now and I think back to my experience in all of my schools, although I would never not welcome someone into the school, like a police officer who, in fact, we have had many students have extremely positive relationships with the officer that was designated for our school. But my inclination is not to say, yeah, let's put an armed officer in the school. I would obviously want to get the feedback from you as a school committee. I'd want to get the feedback from our public safety officials as to what they're thinking, and obviously feedback from students, teachers, and parents at the same time to see their perspective. But my concern just is, are we changing that atmosphere from something other than a nurturing schoolhouse when we do that?
Thank you. So that does conclude the formal questions. We're doing very well on time. We're able to go until about 7:15, so another 30 minutes or so if we need to.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to give an opportunity to the school committee members at this point, if they would like to follow up on any of the questions, we can do that now. No? 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 Always Member Hollins, go ahead.
Yeah. Actually, you said a few things that really interested me. We asked you a question about citizen demand, tax dollars, and you were saying you looked at our budget, you thought a budget should always be clear. Could I ask you if you think there should be cost centers or expense centers in the budget, however it's designed, and if you think if that's important to have them for any reason, and when you've done budgets, if you have cost or expense centers, do you have a lot of them or a few of them? Or just curious how you do
Yeah.
it. Or you think.
I'm not sure if your question is by school.
Well, we definitely have them by school, but
Right.
for other things, you were talking about different ways of building the budget, and
Yeah.
I'm just curious how you feel about.
I mean, I think what we have broken it down similarly is by school. Obviously not the revenue necessarily by school, but the costs by school. And then what you could do, we did not do this, but what you could do is apportion to each cost center their share of shared services. I mean, sometimes that gets just a little bit more extensive in the accounting, and I would just wonder what would be the benefit of that additional work in order to do that. I mean, I don't think that, that we should in any way, I guess, I don't know, present the budget in such a way that it would pit one, school versus another. I think we have to always be cognizant of how enrollment affects the budget and make sure that if we look at the enrollment, that our resources are spread fairly among those different schools. Understanding that enrollment is going to significantly, the higher the enrollment, the higher the costs are going to be. But if we sort of look at that on a per pupil basis, we should see things that are, reasonably consistent between and among the schools to ensure that we have equity in programming. One school, as an example, shouldn't have an average class size of 28, while another has an average class size of 14 and a much higher personnel budget. I mean, that wouldn't make sense unless there was some very strong educational argument as to what you were trying to accomplish in that school with a much smaller class size. But thinking is all being equal, we would want to see something very similar.
Anyone else with follow-up questions? Member Hollins, you're good? Okay. So I'd love to give you an opportunity now to ask any questions of the committee that you might have.
Sure. I'm interested in the things that you are most looking for in your next superintendent. And to append to that, how you see the relationship between school committee and superintendent and how it should function.
Hi. I really appreciated your comment about a school committee looking down from 40,000 feet. That's sort of how I see my role on this committee, is figuring out how to bring the entire community to the school and how we invest in our students through the community. So my next superintendent would know how to unify us as a town, as a community, as schools. We have amazing educators. We have people who care in every part of this town. We may not always agree on what we care about, but we all have many people who care and want to do better. And so I need someone who can drive the bus in the same direction and get us all working towards a common goal instead of arguing amongst ourselves about things that don't need to be worried about right now. So that's what I'm looking for, is someone who can get us going together in one direction.
I think I would add, I like to talk to the committee as well as the leadership of the district about I'm not, I'll say all the time, I'm not a budget person, but I have ideas, I have concepts that I feel like would impact our budget in a positive way, but I don't necessarily know how to get there by the numbers. So I would like to be able to have conversations such as you suggested the capacity of our special ed programs. Are we spending too much sending students out of district when we could tweak a few things in the district to allow us to recoup some of that? Because not only would we bring our students who are placed out of district back, but we would potentially recruit students to come into our programs. And then looking also at kind of adding to Member Karen's thought around our staff and recognizing the good work that they all do. How do we stay competitive year over year with our collective bargaining, our compensation for folks who are in leadership positions? I think that as a school committee, I see our job to be kind of, hey, are we still juggling this ball in the air, or has it kind of dropped, and should we, do we have to kind of send it back up there? I don't know if I'm explaining it very well, but I do like that partnership to be the big picture stuff, and also feeling like there's a person receiving the information who can actually help us to achieve those goals. Yeah, okay. Thank you for listening. It can be hard to formulate that,
No, I think that that's really essential, and you've both articulated it from my perspective very well. The superintendent is that point person that's got to steer the bus. It's got to drive the ship, and it's got to make sure that everybody's pulling in the same direction. That's part of the job. But there also has to be that give and take and that flow of information from that 40,000, because your perspective's different than my perspective, is different than other people's perspective, and that's extremely valuable as we set and chart a course for our schools and our school district. So it has to be that partnership.
I think the other thing I would add, and then is we are not always the experts on the state level pieces of what's required within the district. And if I spend too much time thinking about it, I would never sleep again. So I think also certainly a superintendent that the school committee can feel confident understands we're not going to miss some 5-year deadline, or you know what I mean?
Yes.
I don't even know what I'm talking about, but the superintendent has that. I'm okay with saying I don't know what I'm talking about. The superintendent and their staff have that under control.
Absolutely.
They know where that's going. Did you have something to add?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think maybe just following up more on what both of these ladies have said is I really, there needs to truly be a collaboration between the superintendent and the school committee. There isn't, there isn't a problem with sharing, we'll say, bad news with us, because we all are focused on what we can do to provide the best education for our students. That is the only end goal. If that isn't someone's end goal, then they shouldn't be sitting at this table or in this room. And, if you make a bad decision or the candidate makes a bad decision, that's okay, and we'll do what we can to support you with it. But you have to let us know those things.
Absolutely.
And you have to understand that if we are coming to you saying, look, why is this happening or why is that happening, it's not an effort to be critical. It's an effort to say, look, this is what I'm seeing. If I'm wrong, absolutely correct me. If I'm right, what do we need to do to correct whatever action it is, and work together as a team? And being transparent with each other,
Absolutely.
And I think that that's something that I really missed in our previous areas.
And getting back to what I was saying before, I think I addressed that particular point by saying no surprises. There shouldn't be surprises. It's my job to give you a heads up. I may not be happy about the heads up if I screwed up, but it's still my job to give you a heads up so that you know what's happened and what we're doing to try to fix that. None of us are perfect. our organizations aren't perfect, mistakes will happen. Again, I said it's important that we teach our children that it's okay to make a mistake as long as we learn from it and we move forward in a productive direction. But when there's a tendency to be less than forthcoming or, in any way try to bury a mistake, what that does is it does a lot more damage than it ever does good in protection from whomever you're trying to hide that from. It has to be that open and honest, transparent, and trust. That's the only way I have found that a superintendent and a school board works well together, is there has to be that.
Thank you. Anyone else want to add to that? And I want to give you also the opportunity to ask more questions. Sure, go ahead.
Well, since you asked, first I want to thank you for your comment about the arts. I keep reading about the same research, and it's pretty interesting. But what I think is that it is just always going to be a challenge, no matter how much we try to make it work well, because you have a constant sort of turnover of people on the governing body. So they're always trying to get some synergy together, and you have a constant certain amount of turnover in your teaching force and your administrative force. So you're like always trying to hold things together in a sensible way as you describe. But what I hope for in a new superintendent is, we have a lot of governing discussions because we're a governing body, we're not an administrative body. But I hope that we don't lose track of the students that we're serving. They have one chance to get an education. I don't think we, in my view, I don't think we talk enough about what are we doing with keeping our libraries current to make sure we have culturally responsive materials. How are we addressing the families that don't really speak up because maybe they don't have the confidence to speak up? We have a high percentage of economically disadvantaged students. We talk a lot about special ed, as we should, but we have students that are advanced that could accelerate. What are we doing for them? What are we doing for minority children? What are we doing about families that feel, they're in a minority culture or race, and what are we doing? But when I think about it, I think you have one chance to go to first grade and second grade. Are you going to come out being a reader? And you have one chance to get prepared for what you're going to do after school. And I really don't want us to lose focus that the only reason we're doing any of this and trying to communicate and passing policies is that we really want our resident children to get a valuable education for the resources we have and to work hard at that and to really keep looking at that all the time. That's what I think. I agree with everyone else.
I think that's a very valuable reminder to all of us. I mean, what is most beneficial for all students should be what our focus is all the time. We do get pulled sideways with some of the mandates that the state pushes our way, but that's still not a reason not to keep our eyes on providing the best education for our students all the time. I think it's always helpful to remind ourselves that students have, as Member Holland said, one shot at first grade, one shot at second grade, fill in the blank. And every single one of those points is extremely important. So thank you for saying that.
How about other questions for us?
So what are the, I guess, three most important attributes that you're looking for in the next superintendent? I know you mentioned you want someone to lead and steer the ship, which I certainly feel well able to do. What are some of the other things that are really important to you?
I would say a communicator. I had the opportunity to, when talking to people about their experience in the schools during COVID, the kind of repeated refrain I heard about outstanding leaders during COVID was about communication just all the time and how helpful that is. So I think that's one thing I would really like to see. And the other thing is somebody who can draw out the best of the people around them that they're leading, that they don't have to be the one in the spotlight. They can provide the kind of foundation, a stable foundation for people to really shine and to help develop and grow their leadership.
Thank you.
So I would add someone who is an innovative thinker. We're at a point with education where we really have to be thinking more broadly about what that means. I laugh because I have a 9-year-old who's very disabled and did kindergarten twice. So when I hear, well, they only have the opportunity to do it once. Well, if my guy could do every grade twice, like he'd, graduate from high school when he's 32, like that would be kind of perfect timeline for him. He'll just as an example, not to spotlight any one individual student, but he'll probably never read or write. So what are we doing for him in our K through 12 system that puts him in a place where after he leaves us, he has quality of life, he has purpose. And so the innovative piece of it, and also, we have students starting higher education earlier and earlier. And how do we work with that? We have seniors that would love to be volunteers in the schools, and how do we encourage that and continue to foster a more multi-generational community within our school communities.
Yes.
And then I would also, if you couldn't tell already, I haven't been as snarky tonight as I usually am, but you gotta have fun. I want to see someone who works with us who clearly loves being a part of the school community, whether it's, we're punch drunk at 11:30 in an executive session of a school committee meeting and we all have to work the next morning, or it's, true story, this funeral home is on fire across the street from the middle school, and I've got this interim superintendent on the line making sure I know, because it's Greenfield. Everyone's going to know within 5 minutes.
Yep. And
if it's next to the school or in the school or breathes on the school, people expect the school committee is going to know about it.
Yes.
So having a sense of humor about all of those things. And then you've mentioned the other one that's super important to me and I think is really important to our community, and that's the communication piece. And the way you've structured your answers tonight, and what we heard when we did our site visit, although Member Ekstrom and I didn't get a chance to meet you, we met a number of folks who talked about you as a communicator, and I can see that piece is well honed within you. So those three things for me would be super important.
I had something, then you started talking about me and
How about other questions for us?
Yeah,
We have a few more minutes.
Just to reiterate, I told folks several times today, we should have fun. We can't forget that we work in schools, and schools should not be without fun. And we have to take care of each other as much as we have to take care of our students. As far as communication, I just think it bears repeating. Communication is essential. The more people know, the more comfortable they're going to be with what we do. I understand the challenge of communication. I am not afraid to take communication outside of the building. I'm not afraid to go out into the community and talk to people where they feel comfortable. We've been through a time where the vaccination process has moved in that direction to provide people with access in places that they feel comfortable and that they trust. If we have parents that are afraid to come to school because they maybe had a bad experience with school, or they're afraid maybe that they're not going to be able to make themselves understood, then we go to them and we make ourselves available. And I think that's really, really important. And I think it's important that, we always be present for each other, and that a commitment is being made. One of the students I spoke with today mentioned, when I asked some of the things he thought students would think were important, he said, well, we really don't want someone who's going to jump around. And I said, understood. understood. I said, I'm too old to jump around. I said, I'm looking for a long-term relationship for the next 10 to 15 years in a place where I can feel comfortable, in a place where I feel that my values and goals are in line with the people in the community and the leaders of that school district, which would be you folks. I feel that that is the case based on all of the research that I've done. That doesn't mean things are perfect. That just means that we're simpatico in the things that we find important and that we want to attend to. So I appreciate everything that you've offered tonight. I hope I was able to answer all of your questions while staying in a reasonable time frame.
And I do think Member Exner wanted to add one more thing.
Sure.
I actually, something that I'm really looking for out of a superintendent is confidence. So our interim superintendent, I will call her because something's spinning in my head, and she'll either say, yeah, actually, that's a good point, that's worth thinking about, or she'll say, Susan, you're being crazy, just let it go. And I don't question either of those.
Right.
And I want the next superintendent to be that person. When I call and say, hi, why is this happening? They either give me a reason, and I will tell them why I'm questioning. It's never because I think someone's doing something wrong. And, okay, should we be thinking about this thing over here? Yep, that's good, or nah, no need to worry about it. And I want to hang up the phone, I'm like, all right, I got the answer I'm looking for, that's fine.
Yep.
I don't care what the answer is, I just want to know the answer.
And I will be the first to tell you, like Member Prietti, if I don't know the answer, because I do not know all, I will tell you that I don't know, but I will tell you how I'm going to find it. I think that's important, and that comes with the confidence and the trust that is only built up over time. I thank you for mentioning the folks that you spoke with, and I'm sure they gave you, sort of an accurate depiction from me from a variety of places and roles. But one of the things that I am known for is the honesty and dedication and being present. I said to one of the students today, I believe it's my job to go to concerts and go to plays and go to the Memorial Day ceremony at this school and all the different opportunities that we have. I think that's important and that's essential. And I have never gotten anything but gratitude and thanks from my students over the years for being that kind of person. And so if you're looking for somebody to really be a part of your community, and I will say, because you do know that right now I reside in Uxbridge, I would be moving here. I would not be trying to do that as a commute. That would be crazy, and I'm not young enough to do that.
I'm not even entirely sure where Uxbridge is. I know it's Central Mass.
Yeah, Central
somewhere.
Mass. There you
Okay.
go. Yep.
It's next to where?
Where?
Where's where?
So, I am all in that respect. So I just think that's important for you to know.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Anything else?
No, I don't think so.
Anything else on this side of the table? How about a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
And a second from Member Karen. And any abstentions or any noes to adjourning? There we go. We are adjourned at 7:08. Thank you, sir, for being with us.
Thank you.